2024. Feed prices have doubled in 2 years. Supply chains are broken. Farmers around the country are worried. They can't find the feed they need. The feed they find costs more than they can afford. Some livestock is being sold because families can't feed them. This farmer depends on a system that's suddenly failing. The feed stores, the suppliers, the entire industrial agricultural machinery that modern farming built itself around. And without it, he doesn't know what to do. But just 50 miles away, on an Amish farm, something completely different is happening. The animals are eating. They're healthy. They're calm. The farmer shows no stress, no anxiety, no dependence on systems he cannot control.
While many farmers depend on stores to feed their animals, one community has quietly done things differently for generations. They've rejected the industrial feed system entirely. They feed hundreds of animals, horses, cattle, chickens, sheep, goats, without buying a single bag of commercial feed. So what do they feed them when they don't buy commercial feed? The answer may surprise you.
The Amish have lived in North America for nearly 300 years. For most of that time, they farmed without depending on industrial systems. They've raised animals, grown crops, and sustained their communities using knowledge refined through centuries of practical experience. Their farming philosophy is fundamentally different from modern industrial agriculture. They don't see animals as production units to be maximized through chemicals and commercial feed. They see animals as part of a living ecosystem, interconnected with land, seasons, and family. Feeding livestock without commercial feed requires a completely different approach. It requires thinking about your entire farm as a system. It requires planning months ahead. It requires knowledge passed down through generations about what animals need, when they need it, and how to provide it using resources available on the land. This isn't something Amish farmers figure out in winter when feed is needed. It begins in spring, when decisions are made about what crops to plant. It continues through summer, when hay is grown and harvested. It reaches toward completion in autumn, during final preparations. By the time winter arrives, the entire year's feeding has been prepared. But understanding how begins with something most modern farmers have forgotten. The foundation of Amish animal feeding is pasture. Healthy, well-managed pasture provides the majority of animals' food during growing season, roughly from May through November. When pasture is good, animals eat most of what they need without any additional feed. But not all pasture is equal. Some farmers just throw animals into a field and let them eat. The Amish do something more sophisticated. They practice rotational grazing, moving animals to different pasture sections at careful intervals. Rotational grazing works like this. Animals graze in one section of the pasture for perhaps 5 to 7 days. Then they're moved to a different section. The first section, no longer being grazed, begins to recover. New growth emerges. Roots strengthen. The pasture rejuvenates. This simple practice transforms everything. A pasture managed through rotational grazing produces more nutrition over the entire season than pasture that's continuously grazed. The animals eat better. The land improves. It's a system that works with nature rather than against it. Moving the fence requires no complex technology, just labor and knowledge. An Amish family might spend an hour daily moving fences, adjusting where animals graze. It's routine work, done with the same dedication as everything else on the farm. When pasture is managed well, animals stay in good body condition. They're healthy. They require fewer veterinary interventions. They're productive, whether producing milk, meat, or work. Pasture-fed animals have fundamentally different characteristics than grain-fed animals, and the Amish understand these differences deeply. But pasture alone isn't enough. As autumn progresses and winter approaches, pasture quality declines. The grass becomes sparse. The weather becomes harsh. Animals require additional food that comes from resources the family has prepared during the season. Which brings us to something few modern farmers do anymore. In spring, while some crops are being planted for human consumption, other crops are being planted specifically to feed livestock. These crops represent the foundation of winter feeding. The success of these plantings determines whether animals eat well or just barely survive winter. Hay is the most important livestock feed. A dairy cow might need 20 pounds of hay daily during winter. A horse might need 15 pounds. Multiply that by the number of animals, multiply by the length of winter, and you understand why hay production is everything on an Amish farm. Haying is grass allowed to mature and dry. The timing is crucial. The grass must be cut at exactly the right stage, when nutrition is highest, but before it over-matures and loses quality. This requires reading the plant, understanding seasons, and knowing exactly when to act. Haying is the most important work of the year. When the weather breaks perfectly and hay can be cut and dried in the field without rain, the entire community mobilizes. Families work sunup to sundown during this critical window. The hay they produce must sustain their animals for 6 months. The smell of fresh hay drying in the sun is the smell of preparation. It's the smell of security. Every bale represents days of animal feeding. Bales are created through simple machinery that the Amish have integrated into their farming. Hay balers, for example, are mechanical but not electric. They're powered by the tractors, which are powered by horses or engines. By midsummer, the barn is beginning to fill with hay. Stack upon stack, bale upon bale. The visual abundance is striking. This is food for 6 months of animals. Alongside hay production, grain crops are grown. Corn, oats, wheat, barley. These crops provide concentrated nutrition that supplements hay during winter. Not all livestock gets grain, and not all animals need it equally, but strategic grain feeding improves animal health and productivity. Corn production requires care. The corn must mature to optimal stage. It must be harvested and dried and stored properly. Moisture affects everything. If stored grain has too much moisture, it molds and becomes dangerous. Modern feed stores have simplified livestock feeding by providing complete feeds, bags containing everything an animal needs. The Amish have kept something more sophisticated, understanding what each animal needs and providing the combination of feeds that meets those needs. But preparing for winter begins much earlier than autumn. In early summer, when winter seems impossibly distant, Amish farmers are asking a crucial question. Will we have enough? Enough hay? Enough grain? Enough food to keep all our animals healthy through 6 months of cold and snow? This isn't approximate guessing. It's precise calculation. A farmer knows he has 30 milk cows. Each needs 20 pounds of hay daily. Winter lasts 170 days. That's 102,000 pounds of hay required for the cows alone. Add horses, beef cattle, sheep, chickens, goats, and the number becomes substantial. If he miscalculates, animals go hungry. Barns aren't just shelter from snow. They're carefully designed storage facilities. The structure must protect feed from weather and rodents.
The interior must be organized for efficient feeding. Walkways must allow animals to eat easily. Every detail matters.
By late autumn, the barn is packed. There's no more room. If the farmer didn't produce enough feed, he can't acquire it now because he can't store it. The entire system depends on accurate calculation in summer and successful execution through autumn. This simple habit, calculating needs and producing enough, begins months before winter. When winter snow covers the pasture and ice makes fields inaccessible, the stored feed becomes everything. Animals eat hay and grain that was grown months earlier. They depend entirely on work done while weather was good and growth was possible. Winter feeding is physical work. Hay is heavy. Grain must be measured accurately for each animal type. Water must be unfrozen. Buckets must be carried, or wells must be managed carefully. Paths through snow to the barn must be maintained. Everything is harder in winter. The animals show no signs of hardship. They're fed well. They're healthy. They maintain body condition. Some are producing milk. Some are pregnant, preparing to give birth in spring. The feed system sustains them completely through winter scarcity. What happens during snow-covered winters may surprise you. Not catastrophe, but simply different routines that have been practiced for centuries. By late winter, when spring is still weeks away and stored feed is being carefully rationed, the success or failure of summer's preparation becomes obvious. Families that calculated correctly and produced enough have animals that remain healthy. Families that miscalculated face difficult choices. When spring arrives and fresh grass emerges, the reliance on stored feed gradually decreases. Animals return to pasture. The barn feed can be reserved for those who continue to need it. Young animals, pregnant and nursing mothers, working animals with high energy needs. The cycle completes and begins anew. Different animals have different nutritional needs, and the Amish understand these differences deeply. A horse, for example, is built for grass. Its digestive system evolved on pasture. It can thrive on quality hay and pasture alone with minimal additional feed. Horses on Amish farms work hard, pulling plows, wagons, buggies. They need energy. But unlike racehorses or show horses, Amish workhorses are fed simply: hay, pasture, and perhaps some oats during peak working seasons. Nothing complex or expensive. Dairy cows require different feeding than beef cattle. A dairy cow is producing milk daily, an enormous output. She needs quality hay, access to pasture when available, and targeted grain to support milk production. Beef cattle, by contrast, primarily need to gain weight and body condition. A dairy cow might be given grain specifically during milking time. The grain encourages her to come to the milking station and provides calories for milk production. But the foundation of her diet remains hay and pasture. Chickens are different entirely. They're omnivores, eating grains, insects, plants, anything they can find. An Amish farm raises chickens primarily for eggs and meat, feeding them grain produced on the farm, supplemented with whatever they find foraging. Sheep and goats are browsers and grazers, eating grass and leaves and shrubs. They're less demanding than cattle, but provide wool and meat, making them valuable on diversified farms. The Amish approach is to understand each animal type and provide what it needs. This is more complex than industrial agriculture, which typically feeds all animals the same formula, regardless of species or individual needs. But this complexity comes with advantages. Animals are healthier, the system is more resilient, and less depends on external inputs. Feeding livestock isn't just an agricultural task, it's integral to family life. Decisions about animals are made together. Children learn from their parents how much feed each animal needs, what quality is acceptable, how to recognize health and illness in animals. Modern farming has built an enormous dependence on commercial feed systems. Farmers purchase complete, balanced feeds that supposedly contain everything animals need. They depend on regular deliveries. They depend on prices remaining affordable. Contrast with Amish farm. The animals are still eating. The farm is still functioning. There's no dependence on external systems. But this dependence creates vulnerability. When supplies are interrupted, as they are now, many farmers are helpless. When prices increase, as they are doing now, many farmers cannot afford to feed their animals. The system that was supposed to make farming easier has actually made it more fragile. The Amish rejection of this system wasn't backward thinking. It was prophetic. By maintaining self-sufficiency in feed production, they've protected themselves from market disruptions. If feed prices triple, they notice it, but aren't destroyed by it because they don't depend on markets to feed their animals. The knowledge passed from generation to generation includes not just techniques, but philosophy. Animals are living beings, worthy of respectful care. Feed is produced, not purchased. The farm is a closed system where nothing is wasted and everything serves a purpose. Nothing is wasted on an Amish farm. Crop residues become animal feed or bedding. Animals produce manure that fertilizes fields. The system cycles nutrients. The fields improve year by year rather than degrading. Studies have shown that well-managed Amish farmland actually improves over time. Soil health increases, biodiversity increases. The farm becomes more productive while using fewer external inputs. This is the opposite of industrial agriculture, where land typically degrades over time. The Amish understand something profound. What we do with the land affects those who come after us. If we draw down resources faster than they can be replaced, we impoverish the future. If we live within the limits the land can support, the land remains healthy indefinitely. Modern farming has gained efficiency and convenience. Those are real benefits. But it's lost something equally real: connection to the land, understanding of natural cycles, ability to sustain yourself if systems fail. These aren't romantic notions. They're practical advantages that are becoming increasingly relevant. The question isn't whether modern agriculture is completely wrong. It has advantages. The question is whether depending entirely on systems beyond your control is wise. The Amish answer is no. And their alternative, producing enough food for their animals on their own land, has proven remarkably successful over 300 years. We return to where we began, a peaceful Amish farm. Animals rest after a day of eating hay grown on the property, grain produced from fields worked by family hands, pasture managed through careful rotation. The barn is full. The animals are fed. The family sleeps soundly, knowing their livestock is cared for. No dependency on external systems. No worry about supply disruptions or price increases. Just quiet confidence that they can care for their animals using resources within their control. Knowledge passes through practice. A child who has spent years learning which crops to plant, when to harvest hay, how to calculate feed needs, how to recognize healthy animals, that child will be capable of independent farming. They'll possess resilience that modern agriculture doesn't teach. Every meal on an Amish farm is built on knowledge of how to feed animals. whether it's milk from a cow they milked themselves or meat from an animal they raised. The connection between person and food is direct and real. If every feed store closed tomorrow, would your animals still have enough to eat? Could you produce feed on your own land? Do you know what your animals need? Do you have the knowledge to sustain them if commercial systems failed? The Amish answer to these questions is yes. And their answer comes from centuries of practice, knowledge deliberately preserved, and a commitment to stewardship that extends beyond profit to responsibility for the land and creatures entrusted to their care. If this glimpse into Amish livestock feeding practices has interested you, taught you something new, or made you reconsider what resilient agriculture might look like, please like this video and subscribe for more documentaries about Amish communities, traditional farming skills, food preservation, self-sufficiency, and the remarkable wisdom of cultures that deliberately maintain knowledge modern society tends to forget.
Sometimes the most profound knowledge is the simplest. Sometimes what modern systems dismiss as inefficient is actually sustainable. Sometimes what we call progress requires abandoning skills we might desperately need in the future. The Amish remind us that feeding animals can be done through knowledge rather than purchasing power. Their farms prove that producing your own feed, managing pastures thoughtfully, understanding your animals' needs, and working with natural cycles creates resilience. In learning their methods, we don't abandon modern technology. We gain options. We gain skills. We gain confidence that if systems fail, we still possess the knowledge to care for ourselves and those dependent on us.